Welcome to Inspiring Perspectives, a podcast by thinkPARALLAX featuring fresh takes and bold ideas for the real-world sustainability challenges and solutions at some of the world's most respected brands and companies. I'm your host, Derek Sabori, and this is what sustainability sounds like today. Well, hey, Ramsay Siegal, thanks for being on Inspiring Perspectives. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you so much. One of my colleagues here at thinkPARALLAX had met you months ago, and she's like, "Oh, you have to talk to Ramsay. She's doing amazing things over at Earthshot Ventures. You're a partner there. Tell me a little bit about. I watched the video. There's a really moving and inspiring video, but tell me a little bit about your role there at Earthshot Ventures and what you all do there."
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a partner at Earthshot Ventures. We're a $94 million climate tech venture capital firm. And we invest across the climate spectrum. So think energy, mobility, food and agriculture, industry, and carbon. And we've made 22 investments to date. We have an incredible list of investors and LPs that have supported our fund. And we're so excited to be taking climate action through supporting founders that are creating incredible technology.
Yeah, I'm sure you get exposure to a lot of great either technologies, ideas, founders. You can go to your website, and I know you've got a list of all the things you're investing in and that are part of. But tell me a little bit about the path that you took to get here. How does one end up as a partner at a VC like Earthshot Ventures?
So it was not a direct path, but sort of following my passion around decarbonization since I studied architecture in undergrad school. We were doing high performance building design. The LEED certification standard had just emerged in 2002 and 2003 when I was at USC Architecture School. And I was just so curious about how buildings and the grid would create and sustain themselves independently. And was that possible through technology? So rather than becoming an architect after college, I joined Chevron Energy Solutions, which had, it's the parent company of Chevron that had a clean technology arm where we were selling solar and energy efficiency projects to universities, college campuses, K through 12 campuses, doing whole assessments of their campus structure. So all the buildings and boilers and chillers, pumps, infrastructure, and recommending energy efficiency measures to bring down their overall load, and then proposing solar under a power purchase agreement so they could adopt solar with no upfront cost, right? So applying more of their capital to pencils and books and all the things that would fulfill their educational mission. And we would take all of the complicated energy work and sort of help them decarbonize through the tools that we were proposing. So it was a really interesting time to be in the industry, and the power purchase agreement as a tool to enable customers to adopt solar for no upfront capital cost was just emerging. And we spent a lot of time with financiers getting them comfortable with the structure, which then enabled us to sell more solar, which was so exciting. And looking back, I think starting in sales is a very unlikely place for a VC to start. And I couldn't imagine a more exciting place to be. You're the tip of the spear. You're talking directly to the customer. You're getting rejected. You're getting feedback. You're incorporating that all, bringing it back to the office, improving the way that you message and position and talk about the product, improving the product itself, thinking about creative ways to sell and price. So all of those learnings from very early on were just so exciting. And I'm really grateful that that's how it began. And then I went to graduate school to study smart grid technology, again, sort of deepening this understanding of decarbonizing an entire grid, which is, humans' largest machine is the electricity grid. And after that experience, I got a job at eMeter, which is at the time a startup that had pioneered the concept of a meter data management software technology. So we were selling directly to utilities that were rolling out smart meters across their network. And we would take in all that information, present it for billing, which meant it was core sort of software infrastructure for the utility. And then once we had all that data, we could present it for billing and other uses, remote connect, disconnect, et cetera. So the dream of a smart connected grid really stood on the foundation of this meter data management software and getting intelligence from meters across the network. And so there, again, I got experience spending a lot of quality time with utilities, understanding what they're motivated by, how they function, how they make decisions, how to speed up the sales cycle, how to influence decision-making through channels. And a lot of that work was international. Our first couple customers that we won when I joined were in Europe, and then Asia Pacific markets following Fukushima began to warm up. And so I spent a lot of time in Japan and Kuala Lumpur, Manila, and then in India, working with utilities that, even though they were in these very different places, had very different, very similar challenges, even though they were in a different location, maybe spoke different languages, had very similar sort of technical challenges, and the dream of rolling out smart meters to help improve their grid operations. So after 4 years of that, I decided to join Elemental Accelerator, which is one of the largest climate tech portfolios. It's structured as a nonprofit and known for deploying technology in the real world with a startup then who comes to and applies to the accelerator with a project in mind. And I began setting up the deal flow engine there, and then supporting some corporate partnerships, particularly in the Asia Pacific region where I had just spent time. And then by the end of my time at Elemental, which was a 6-year period, I was leading the portfolio of companies. So I was working directly with founders and project management teams, helping them deploy their technology and accelerate their businesses. And so that was really exciting from sort of zooming out. I was so focused on technology, had this obsession with deploying technology when I was in my sales roles. And then as a leader at an accelerator, you can take this meta view of how to enable impact at a broader scale by supporting incredible founders that had these ideas and concepts and technologies and go-to-market strategies, and helping them move along faster with our capital and our support. And in early 2020, we set the intention to raise a for-profit venture fund that would stand next to the accelerator. So it would be sort of linked, almost like sister organizations. However, we would be independent. So Elemental will continue as a thriving nonprofit that will continue to fund climate technologies, and Earthshot Ventures has spun out to be an independent, for-profit, very vanilla structure venture capital fund.
So you're well positioned to play in this space. It obviously got you to an interesting point. So when we fast forward now to Earthshot Ventures, tell me a little bit about, you've got a great suite of technologies that you all have invested in. What's one or two that you're really excited about right now? Can you tell me which one of those rises to the top?
Definitely. Well, there are 22, and generally what we look for are business models that are working in other sectors that come to climate, and you apply a climate challenge to it. And so we don't necessarily search for a technology in a certain category or whatever's trending at the particular moment, but looking for these very repeatable, profitable business models that can take hold in a climate problem and help make impact that way. One of the companies that is really interesting in the industrial sector is called Cannon Energy. And what they do is apply a waste heat to power technology to oil and gas and industrial sites to take that wasted heat and create electricity that can either be fed back to the grid or fed back to the customer to their operations on site. And the analogy that we use is it's almost like the sun run of industrial decarbonization. So in the same way that it might not occur to a homeowner to put solar and storage on your roof and in your garage, and you might not have the expertise to do that by yourself. You might be afraid to, fiddle with all the technology to get it up and running. A company like Sunrun or Tesla can come and do that in a day and install it and monitor it and operate it and finance it and take that headache off of the homeowner. Mm-hmm. In the same way, Cannon Energy can come to these industrial customers, which many of them have decarbonization targets. They know that they're wasting energy. They know that there are low-hanging fruit opportunities for them to decarbonize. So a company like Cannon can come and do it in a very repeatable way and a very profitable way. So the CFO sees the outcome of these projects and doesn't think of it as a sustainability effort as much as just industrial efficiency. It makes sense to do this because it really pencils. So we're excited about their trajectory, and they have a ton of traction out of the gate.
Wow, those are cool. When we look back, a part of the mission of how you describe it at Earthshot Ventures is that you're harnessing the power of the global network that your team has built to accelerate climate technology adoption and create iconic brands. I'm really interested in that part because I've been a founder and a co-founder. Sometimes the idea of capital almost seems really like mystical. It seems like it's everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. So what separates others? How do others kind of break in and get that funding from you guys? And why is the branding side so important?
Yeah, it's interesting. We coach a lot of our founders to hire a professional graphic designer to work on their deck. It seems like such a vanity thing to do when you're building software or hardware that's very complicated. But in fact, the way that any organization presents themselves to the world is really the first, it's like opening the door of a business, right? So if you have an unprofessionally produced deck by someone who doesn't have experience in graphic design, it leaves a different impression than if it is polished and inspiring and really thoughtfully crafted. But I think in terms of analyzing the successes in climate over the last 15 years that I've been in the industry, the ones that stand out, interestingly enough, have invested in design. So you think about Tesla and Nest and Rivian, O-Power, which used a graphic design firm, or I think a general design firm, but also had expertise in graphic design to make their product really inspiring and attractive and presentable to their customers. Even SolarCity, when they were presenting power purchase agreements to their customers, rather than being a 100-page kind of scary legal document, they worked with a design firm to make it a 7-page sort of very vanilla, like the Disneyland version of a legal contract. It had everything it needed to have, but anyone could read it, and it was delightful, right? And so I think one thing that is important to recognize is that people purchasing clean technology, anyone who is adopting these technologies that founders are creating, are people too. And they make decisions because it's the right thing to do for the planet. It might be the right thing to do for the bottom line. But if they're inspired, the adoption curve is much different. And so it's not the only thing that matters, but I think it is something that is not invested in enough in this sector.
Well, so what you're saying, it's not just the tech, right? You can have a great idea, you've got a great technology to bring to the world, but if you don't have that design element, if it's not appealing, it's that idea also of just meeting your audience where they're at. And the audience is just the average person that is going to see your product or hear your pitch, right? So you've got to make it appealing, like you said.
Yeah, make it understandable. A lot of the technologies that are pitched are quite complicated. I do think there's been a step level improvement in creating an understanding of why a technology is important, what the baseline looks like, and sort of an elementary understanding of what it does and why it does that. And then founders offer a deeper dive for those who are interested, for the technical analyst and everyone. So I think there's been a great improvement there, but I think still in the design, branding, messaging side of the house, there's a long way to go.
Yeah, so that's good. That's some good advice to founders and some great opportunities for designers to start making sure they're reaching the right people to get some good jobs.
That's right.
Let's talk about the capital, though, if we can. Our topic today is this idea of positively deploying capital. I've heard of like catalytic funding and this idea of just really putting capital to work for good. How do we accelerate climate technology adoption and create iconic brands at the same time? So I alluded to the question a little bit earlier. You know, it does seem like money is everywhere and nowhere all at the same time. I know that can be frustrating for startups and founders. Why does it seem that way? What's the breakthrough? Is it networking? What is it?
Yeah, well, I think you've asked a couple of really good questions. One is sort of this concept of positively deploying capital. And I do think over the last 15 years, the definition of that and the sophistication around that, it's a completely different world now. So the idea of catalytic funding, the normal connotation of that is that there's a technology where support from philanthropy or from patient capital will help a company leap over a valley of death that in years past a company would have fallen into. And so if this patient capital or philanthropic capital can come in and help bridge that valley of death, then the traditional VC market or CVC market will come in and participate in follow-on rounds and larger later stage rounds when the technology is validated. So I think the centralization of that conversation, the acknowledgement that valley of death was taking place, has been a great sort of phenomenon and improvement in the way that some of these longer time horizon breakthrough technologies are supported. And there's incredible organizations like Breakthrough Energy Ventures, Azola, and Prime Coalition that really specialize in those areas, Elemental Accelerator as well on the project side. I think also this concept of you can make money and do good at the same time is a big idea that, it'll take a lifetime to continue to explore that. But we see revenue and impact directly correlated. So when a company is deploying their product with a customer and receiving revenue for deploying that product, their impact metrics are increasing at the same speed. And so this idea that you are making an investment in something that's doing good for the world and that it's concessionary is a concept that I think might exist in some corners of this universe. But for climate tech investing and in VC, what I'm seeing right now is if you're financial return focused first, which our firm is, your portfolio is also creating outsized impact because the deployment is directly correlated to the impact.
And I think that's, it's so good. It's really powerful. This idea, though, of the valley of death, I get stuck on that when you say that. I think I have an idea of what that is, but we talked about it in our pre-talk. Tell me a little bit about what that means for some that aren't familiar with the term or the phrase.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. From what I've seen in climate, when companies they create a product first as the very first exercise. So there's the technology readiness levels, TRL, that you might hear, that are basically getting a product from idea to the point in which it can be commercialized. So that's the very first step. The next step is finding a first customer. So it could be a connection that the university has. It could be someone's uncle. It could be, it's usually what we call a snowflake or like a weird one of a kind first demonstration. It has the benefit of being the first, like it's showing that the product is operating, but it probably isn't representative of 5 years from now what their best customer looks like. And so then you have to get from the first to the second to the third to the fourth to the 10th. And so what we've seen is by the 10th customer deployment, then the team starts honing in on what does our best customer look like? This one was a total disaster. We're never doing that again, right? There's so many rich learnings in 1 through 10. And the team starts focusing on, okay, our product is best for middle market because they have a lot of pain points there and they're not equipped to build this technology themselves. And for all these other reasons, like in the world of things that we could go after, we're going to go after this segment in the middle market. And those things are not obvious when a company is doing their first deployment typically. And so what we refer to as the valley of death can mean many things, but most often it's getting those first couple deployments in the ground with representative customers so that when an investor is looking at a pitch deck and they can see that the bet for this technology is going after X customer segment, then you look at their list of customers and they've already landed a couple. Then it's showing the product is working, there's momentum. I can see the velocity because of what they're saying and what they're doing at the same time. And so securing those first couple is where I think philanthropic capital and accelerators and other patient capital can come and support companies.
Wow. So if you're sitting in the valley of death, you might have a great idea, even a great brand, but if it's not getting that momentum, if it's not getting the next one, the next right customer, it's not going to draw more funds and you're going to sit there in the valley rather than claw yourself out of it.
Exactly. And traction, I think, is really underrated and where I think founders should spend most of their time. Everything rolls up to traction, right? Like if you have traction, that means the product's working. That means you've identified the customers that can utilize the product, that are willing to pay, that have the right pain points that you've identified. And so this crossing the valley of death is essentially a more detailed way of talking about how do we get more traction for more companies that create a greater volume of investable opportunities in climate.
From your perspective, I think if we're talking about accelerating climate action and looking at all the different levers that we have, right, where it's changing consumer habits or manufacturing differently or supplier engagement, whatever it is, you also have deploying capital. I think I know the answer to this, but why? I would imagine, what's the most important one in accelerating climate action? Is it the capital? Is it policy and legislation? Is it society? how much of an important role is deploying capital?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it depends on the technology that you're talking about, because each one is different and has different sort of barriers and opportunities. We tend to invest in business to business solutions and less in business to customer solutions. So I think the sort of groundswell of what customers want is less relevant in the work that we're doing, although just general sentiment around climate and climate action is helpful. In terms of capital and policy, we find that policy is an incredibly powerful lever for these companies to open up and create new markets and validate that their market is one worth sort of growing and investing in and creating for customers. I think it's probably most true for the electric vehicle market, where the stimulus of recent days, both at the federal and state level, has created sort of a no-brainer that you could buy a Honda Civic or a Tesla for the same amount of money by the time all the rebates and incentives come through. And if you sit inside both cars, you're in a completely different experience, right? The Tesla is a premium electric vehicle. Honda Civic's sort of bottom of the market by design. And so it's this culmination of bringing together rebates, incentives, government support, and then really compelling technology that creates opportunities for customers to take action.
We're talking about things that are working, kind of what you should do, what to keep an eye out for. That's a great analogy that you just used with the, I never looked at it that way in terms of the Tesla versus the Civic. So it might be time to go do a double take on the Tesla. But what are the challenges though that you're seeing from your your windowsill? What are founders doing wrong? What are they getting wrong? What are we getting wrong as business leaders and society?
Yeah, so as a VC, we are unfortunately in the business of saying no a lot. And common reasons for saying no are that there's not as much traction as we would like to see. Also, organization and clarity of thought, I think, is really important for both the customer pitch and the investor pitch. So the founders that can most clearly articulate what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they're different and special, what those differentiators are the ones that are most likely to succeed. And then for the companies that are in the business of building something in the physical world, hardware or sensors, computer vision, whatever it is, we believe that venture capital dollars shouldn't be used for manufacturing or product sort of deployment. So creating the opportunity to build the business and develop the technology is a great use of venture capital. And then once the technology is validated, using project finance and other non-dilutive tools is essential. And so I think for companies that fall into that category, understanding the chess game to get there is very important. So what sort of what should the customer contracts look like? What scale should the projects be? What conditions should the technology be in to be able to capture that funding is a series of decisions that can be thought through ahead of time so that the founder is playing the right chess game to get to the point where they can capture that kind of funding.
Yeah, this is really fascinating to me because while you're saying that, I'm also thinking of sustainability professionals inside of organizations trying to pitch or sell an initiative that they've got. All of this advice that you're laying out is, I think, analogous to having a program or wanting to make a spend, right? So you've got to make that pitch to leadership within the organization. So it's the same kind of thing, right? You've got to package it up, have a good story, have clear, concise thoughts, show proof of concept, have, first a viable product, the MVP and the TRL that you mentioned. So yeah, it's really good. This is great because we're not only talking to founders here, we're talking to people inside of organizations trying to make change at their places of work.
Absolutely. And I think it comes back down to the foundation of selling. And no matter where you are, you're working nonprofit, for-profit, ventures, in the constructs of a corporate organization, you're always selling ideas and packaging them and figuring out the messaging that will work with your audience. And so that's why I think having that experience at some point in your career, but particularly in the early stages, is really helpful for later stage success.
So I'll ask this because I recently read Daniel Pink's book, To Sell is Human, I think it's called. And it was this idea of just painting a different picture for sales and looking at it through a different lens. Do you have you started there, but what advice do you have for people that are like, no, sales isn't for me, it's not my thing?
Okay, so this is a very good question, which is, can everyone think of themselves as a salesperson?
Mm-hmm.
And this comes into play particularly in our industry with founders who are technical and see many of the sales activities as being a little bit frivolous. So going golfing or dinners, for example. And I think what's really important is that the most successful companies are the ones where the founders lead sales at the beginning, and they understand the product, they understand what can and should and cannot be built, and having that customer interaction and incorporating all of that into the business makes the go-to-market strategy and every single decision, every dollar spent in service of that customer and creating the right product for them. And so what we have done to make it more approachable for folks that might be technical to sort of see themselves as salespeople is to come up with a repeatable process that's almost like engineering your success or engineering your solution around sales, having the same sort of structure that would help you arrive at a technical solution, being the same sort of step gate process to build relationships, to legitimize these in-person interactions, to build the relationships that then lead to signed contracts.
Yeah, that's great. It's a good thing to keep in mind. And what you're throwing at us is it's going to take a lot. Kind of whatever role you're in, you've got to keep a lot of different things in mind. It's that time in the show. It's like a game show where we say it's magic wand time. We always ask our guests sort of like, if you could wave a magic wand and make it all happen overnight, and all the things that you all are working on there could just like poof come to life. What does that aspiration look like? What does that sort of mega vision look like?
Yeah, we're similar to a marketplace where all the participants can grow what they're doing to create more strength and more gravity in the climate movement. I think it can start with more capital at the top. So I think there are plenty of early stage funds. There could be more. There could certainly be more presence at the later stage to support sort of growing companies that are growing into going public, for example. And we would also love to see more founders. So for people who reach out asking about job advice, I often say, have you thought about starting your own company? Instead of looking for a job, could you create your own job and create jobs for many other people? The 22 founders in our portfolio are now employing about 950 people. And so that is the order of magnitude of impact, both in the climate industry, but also in the lives of those individuals who want to take climate action, want to use their skills and talents across many different sectors and bring it to climate. So I certainly think that more talented people creating companies is helpful for the movement and creates more opportunity for us to deploy capital as well.
Yeah. There's, I'm sure you're seeing so much coming at you, and this is such an exciting space. Climate tech to me is really fascinating because it just is moving rapidly. There are a lot of different sectors, a lot of variables to consider. When it comes to, I think, sustainability, ESG, climate action, all of it to get, tied together holistically, in your opinion, how do you think it's all going? Are you feeling optimistic? Are we making great progress? Is there still this gap that we need to fill? Give us your take.
Yeah, so this is my 16th year in climate, and I think this is the most exciting time in history to be doing this work. Mm-hmm. And there's never been more capital. There's never been more diversity in the capital stack. So project finance and debt, philanthropic capital, all of it has grown so much over the last 16 years. And also in terms of tailwinds, there's the successes I mentioned earlier, Tesla, Rivian, Nest, SolarCity, O-Power. There's so many successes that we stand on the shoulders of where, it seemed like conserving the world, came at its cost maybe in previous iterations. And now it is very clear that there are large successes to be had in the future. And we're excited to be part of some of those. And I think at its foundation, climate is the mother of all industries, and it's improving all the things that support human life and the planet. And so we're going to have to revise and update all of our industrial systems, all of our food systems, all of our transportation systems. And so we can do this important work over our lifetime and probably our children's lifetime as well. And there's money to be made, and it's also very important work. So I don't think there could possibly be a more exciting time to do this work.
That's good to hear. So it's definitely not a fad. It's not going away. We can assure people, young people too, coming into the workplace, this is a career path for you that is going to be impactful and
That's right.
lucrative as well. Give me your take on the future. Then, if we pull out the crystal ball, Ramsay, what is it when it comes to climate tech solutions or topics?
Yeah.
What's top of mind for you when you look out to the future?
Yeah. One thing that we're concerned about is constraint in the material supply for the battery supply chain. The electric vehicle adoption is happening faster than anyone had predicted. Thankfully, I think the Model Y was one of the top 5 most popular cars in the United States this year. So as the prices fall and people are comfortable adopting sort of that middle part of the bell curve, we're expecting that there will be constraints there in the supply chain, which then means there will be implications around pricing. And so we've made 2 investments that are directly sort of targeting that category. One is Cobalt Metals, and the other is Lilac Solutions in the lithium space. There's a third called MitraChem, which is innovating through AI in battery chemistry technology to enable more flexibility based on rare earth metals for those who are utilizing them in their products. And so we're really keenly aware that that could be a constraint in the electrification of everything and an area where we're spending some time.
That's a lot to keep in mind. And I think, for you in your space, I would imagine you've got to do your best to stay inspired, keep up on resources, keep up on trends. Where do you go for advice or those resources that you need to have at your beck and call?
Well, I'm inspired by all of our peers who are doing this work at peer funds. For those who are looking for other resources, I think the Catalyst podcast by Shel Khan is really great. One interesting thing about working in climate is that you might assume that it's doom and gloom all the time. But in fact, we find so much optimism in working with founders every day, and the energy that they have and that they bring to commercialize their technology, to build their teams, to work with customers, to do very difficult work, but they find so much joy in it. And we find so much joy in enabling them as well. So I think that's our greatest source of inspiration.
Ramsay, what do we want to leave listeners with? If you had to kind of boil it down to 3 takeaways, whether it comes to deploying capital or accelerating climate adoption or climate action, or even having an iconic brand, what do you want people to know? What do you want listeners to take away from this?
Well, I think anyone listening may not recognize the power that they have to influence this climate movement and to influence the people around them. And so I think one thing to sit with after this is just recognizing what power and influence you do have. And that could be the way that you purchase things when you're at a store. So do you purchase things that have a lot of packaging or opt for the ones that have less packaging? When you go to a dealership and you're looking at cars, what car are you purchasing? And then in your work, whether you work for a corporate or a startup, all the decisions that you make have power and can lead to climate outcomes or more beneficial climate outcomes. So I would say that is probably the most important piece, is figuring out where we all have influence and how we can use it for good.
What sustainability topic? I mean, I would imagine you're dealing with climate tech, so we're talking about emissions, but we're also in our space talking about waste and water pollution and land use and biodiversity impacts and human capital and labor issues, safety, all of it. It's all there. It's all important. That I get. Does any one of those topics sort of rise to the level outside of climate action that you would urge founders to pay attention to, or urge people in this space to really kind of keep an eye on?
So in terms of areas to develop technologies, I think what's most important is that the founder comes from a market or understands a market where they're building a technology. It's not always the case that has to be in place, but in most cases, a founder comes from an industry or a PhD research area where they truly understand the problems and the gaps, and they can see opportunities to build where no one else is building. So that would be my main word of advice, is to figure out what superpowers you have and understandings of an industry that you have, and bring that to bear in the technology that you're building and the problem that you're going after.
That's good advice for founders. What advice do you have for people that are earlier on their journey or want to get into this space, want to have a job like yours or playing a role like you do?
I think that one misconception is that you need to have a technical degree to be active in the climate industry, to get a job at the entry level. And the reality is that companies need every single type of expertise and background, whether that's accounting and finance or sales and commercialization, graphic design. There are lots of demands for people with technical backgrounds as well. So I think the sort of first step is to recognize that all skills are needed. And there are many resources for people that want to enter climate now. And those are available online. There's within the Elemental portfolio alone, there's hundreds and hundreds of jobs available at any given time. Climate Tech BC also has many job openings as well. So I think that the most important thing is to get started and to not wait for the perfect job and the perfect company, but just get a wedge in, get yourself in the door and start building experience and work as hard as you possibly can. And not be frustrated by how difficult it is, but sort of find the joy in being part of creating the solutions and finding the pathways that create an easier time of commercializing these technologies. So just get started somewhere.
That's great. And I love that wedge analogy. That's a visualization that I have of just like squeezing in there in that door real quick and like, nope, keep it open for me. I want in.
Yeah.
Ramsay, this has been so great. Thank you for all of your thoughts and insights and advice. Is there anything else that you want listeners to know about, or where can we go to learn more about the work that you're doing at Earthshot Ventures?
So you can go to our website, which is earthshot.vc, and you can always reach out on LinkedIn. Also, we have a female founder and funder happy hour happening in San Francisco on April 24th, and invite anyone who is in either one of those categories to join and sort of create connections and community there. And there'll be other opportunities to engage throughout the year. So I hope to meet everyone who's listening and support one another as we continue to support climate.
Well, thanks, Ramsay. Thanks for supporting us on the show and giving out all your awesome advice and insights. And hopefully we'll catch you soon and follow up on any other new great climate tech that we need to know about, thanks to the capital that you all are deploying there.
Sounds great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for checking out our show today. This show was produced by the team at thinkPARALLAX, a sustainability and communications agency with 2 decades of experience working with companies at every stage of the sustainability journey. We are experts at assessing where a company is today, defining a North Star, and developing a roadmap to get there. If your team needs sustainability guidance or training, or you have a recommendation for a guest or a topic on the show, visit us at thinkparallax.com. We'd love to hear from you.